What happens when a prince wakes up one morning and realizes the crown has erased him from history? When a man born into centuries of tradition finds his name scratched out by the very father who once held him in his arms? That's exactly what just happened to Prince Harry, and Meghan Markle is right there with him, watching everything they built come crashing down in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. As of today, they are no longer Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Those 12 words are all it took. A sentence read out loud in hushed tones behind palace walls, signed and sealed by King Charles himself. A decree that does more than take away 2 titles. It wipes away the very foundation of Harry and Meghan's identity. And make no mistake, this is not some symbolic gesture. It is a punishment, a message, and a turning point in the history of the monarchy. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Let me ask you this. Did you ever think it would come to this? Did you ever believe the royal family would go so far as to strip away everything, leaving Harry and Meghan with nothing but their Hollywood dreams and fractured reputations? Because that's exactly where we are. And if you think you know the full story, you don't. Not yet. This moment has been years in the making. It didn't happen overnight. It's the climax of scandal after scandal, betrayal after betrayal, and a growing realization within Buckingham Palace that Harry and Meghan were no longer allies but liabilities. The couple who once stood on the palace balcony waving to cheering crowds is now standing outside the gates, not as royals, but as outsiders. But why now? Why did King Charles finally lower the boom when he could have done this years ago? After Megxit, after Oprah, after Spare, after Netflix. Why this moment? That's the question that keeps buzzing in everyone's mind. The answer isn't simple. It's a mix of palace politics, public pressure, and the cold calculations of a king trying to protect his legacy. Imagine the scene. Inside Buckingham Palace, advisors gather around polished oak tables, William pacing silently and tapping her pen against briefing papers, Camilla sitting back with a look of quiet resolve. The debates were heated, the arguments fierce, but in the end, there was consensus. Harry and Meghan had crossed too many lines. And if Charles wanted to preserve the monarchy for William and George, he had no choice but to act. Now pause for a moment and think about what this actually means. When Harry married Meghan in 2018, the world called it the modern fairy tale. An American actress becoming a duchess, a mixed-race woman walking into the oldest institution in Britain, a couple heralded as the fresh future of the monarchy. The cheers were deafening, the celebrations worldwide. And yet, less than a decade later, those same titles that were once celebrated in headlines across the globe are gone, torn away. Do you feel the irony? The tragedy? Let's talk about the weight of titles. Many people scoff and say, it's just words. Duke, Duchess, HRH. But here's the truth. Those words are worth millions. They open doors. They legitimize careers. They sell books, land interviews, and lock-in contracts. Without them, Harry and Meghan are not royal figures breaking free. They are simply another celebrity couple fighting for relevance in a world that moves on quickly. And here's where it gets brutal. The moment the decree was announced, calls began flooding in from agents, producers, branding consultants. What happens to the Netflix deal? What about speaking fees? What about the brand they've been building around their Sussex identity? Can they still sell their story without that royal sheen? The answer is murky, and it terrifies them. But let's not forget the emotional side. This isn't just business. This is family. Harry has now been publicly and officially cut down by his own father. Think about that. A father stripping his son of the very titles that defined his place in the world. How does a man recover from that? How does Meghan cope with watching her husband's heritage dismantled in front of the world? We have to ask ourselves, was this always inevitable? Was this moment written the day Harry and Meghan decided to walk away in 2020? Did their decision to chase freedom and independence plant the seeds of their downfall? Or did the palace push them to such extremes that stripping the titles was the only possible conclusion? The debates rage on. Some say Charles is cruel, turning his back on his son in the hour of greatest need. Others argue this was mercy delayed, that the monarchy tolerated too much for too long, and decisive action was long overdue. Where do you stand? Do you see Charles as the cold king or the weary father forced to act? And then there's William. Never underestimate the brother dynamic. William has been simmering with quiet fury ever since Spare landed on shelves. The punches thrown in print, the humiliations made public. How long could he allow his brother to undermine him and the institution he will one day rule? Behind closed doors, whispers say William delivered an ultimatum. Either Harry is cut loose, or the monarchy suffers irreparable harm. Do you see how all of this weaves together? This isn't one decision. It's a chain reaction, years of grievances finally exploding into one act that changes everything. The monarchy has spoken, and Harry and Meghan are no longer royals. But let's not pretend this is the end of the story. No, this is only the beginning of their downfall. Because when those titles vanish, the world they carefully constructed begins to collapse brick by brick. Think of the friends who once stood by them. The Oprah interviews, the Hollywood allies, the celebrity defenders. How many will still line up now that the couple no longer carries that royal shine? Think of the brand endorsements, the charity galas, the book tours. Do they hold the same weight without the words Duke and Duchess attached? And the cruelest cut of all, their children. Archie and Lilibet, once part of royal lineage, now left in a gray area. What does this mean for their future? Their schooling, their safety, their identities? Meghan has fought tooth and nail to secure recognition for her children. And now, it slips through her fingers. The irony is staggering. Harry and Meghan claimed they wanted freedom. And now they have it. Freedom with no strings, no crown, no obligations. But what does freedom look like when you no longer have a safety net? When the doors start closing and the spotlight fades? We are standing at a crossroads. On one side, a couple desperate to prove they don't need the crown. On the other, a monarchy determined to show the world it can survive without them. And caught in the middle is a family ripped apart by choices that can never be undone. The question I leave you with at this point is simple. What happens to Harry and Meghan now that the crown has erased their names? What happens when everything they relied on, titles, prestige, royal aura, vanishes in one stroke of a pen? Because what comes next will change not just Harry and Meghan's lives, but the monarchy itself. And no one saw it coming. What kind of world unravels when one stroke of a pen sends shockwaves through centuries of tradition? Imagine it. The king, seated at his desk in Buckingham Palace, his hand steady but heavy with the weight of history. The document before him is not just parchment. It is power, condensed into words that would strip his own son and daughter-in-law of the last remaining threads tying them to the crown. The moment his pen meets paper, everything changes. The monarchy does not whisper, it roars. And the roar echoes across the globe. This is the decree that shook the world. As of today, they are no longer Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Those words are not simply ceremonial. They are devastating, final, irreversible. They close a chapter that began in fairy tale romance and ends in scandal, exile, and disgrace. But what was it really like in that room when King Charles signed away his son's identity? And why now, after so many years of hesitation, after tolerating insult after insult, did he choose this precise moment to drop the bombshell? Let's peel back the velvet curtains of Buckingham Palace and step inside the royal war room. Picture the scene, thick velvet drapes drawn to shield the windows from the flashing cameras outside. An oak desk polished to perfection, stacked with briefing papers marked confidential, sovereign eyes only. At the center, the royal decree. Drafted in careful legal terms by palace lawyers, each line crafted to withstand scrutiny, each phrase carrying centuries of precedent. King Charles sits silently, his face unreadable, though his eyes reveal a storm brewing behind them. Around him, trusted advisors shift in their seats. No one dares speak. Not yet. At his right, Camilla watches quietly, her presence a reminder that Charles is no longer just a father. He is a king, bound to protect the institution above personal ties. At his left, the shadows of history loom. The ghost of Edward VIII, the echoes of Diana's tragic battles with the firm, and the recent scars left by Harry's memoir. This is not just about titles. It is about survival. And then the moment comes. The king picks up his pen, dips it in ink, and scrawls his signature with the same flourish used to approve state laws, military orders, and acts of parliament. The decree is sealed. The decision is final. And the silence in the room says everything. A royal line has been severed. But what does it mean when a monarch strips his son of his titles? Let's break it down. Because this isn't just a symbolic slap on the wrist. This is exile in all but name. First, the titles themselves. Duke and Duchess of Sussex were more than names. They were brands, identities, and shields. Without them, Harry and Meghan are no longer tethered to the aristocratic prestige of Britain. No more ceremonial invitations. No more precedence in the royal hierarchy. When they walk into a room now, they do so as private citizens. Commoners. Imagine the fall, from palace grandeur to ordinary introductions. Do you feel the sting of that humiliation? Second, the privileges. Gone are the honorary roles, the patronages, the access to certain royal functions. Think of the red carpets rolled up, the invitations revoked, the charity galas once proud to announce the Duke and Duchess will attend, now scrambling to fill the gap. The prestige that once made them desirable guests evaporates overnight. And third, the brand power. The loss of these titles doesn't just cut them off socially. It slices through their financial empire. Netflix didn't sign them for their acting talent. Spotify didn't invest because of their podcasting genius. Book publishers didn't hand out multi-million-dollar advances for their creative flair alone. They invested in the aura of royalty. And with one decree, that aura is gone. But here's the question. Why now? Why not in 2020, when Harry and Meghan first walked away? Why not after the Oprah interview, when they accused the palace of coldness and racism? Why not after Spare, when Harry painted his father as distant and William as aggressive? Why wait until now? The answer, sources suggest, lies in timing and pressure. Behind the scenes, the monarchy has been quietly recalibrating. Charles knew his reign would be short compared to his mother's, and William's shadow looms larger with each passing year. The monarchy cannot afford loose ends, scandals lingering like open wounds. And so, after months of internal debate, after heated exchanges between advisors, after polls showed overwhelming public support for stripping the Sussexes, Charles acted. Now pause with me and think about this. What must it feel like for Harry, the boy who walked behind his mother's coffin, who once looked up at his father for guidance, to realize that same father has now erased his royal identity? What does it feel like for Meghan, who dreamed of rewriting the royal rulebook, to find herself written out of it entirely? This decree isn't just political. It's personal, and it lands like a hammer blow. Let's step outside the palace for a moment. Imagine the headlines erupting across the world. King Charles strips Harry and Meghan of titles. Sussexes reduced to commoners. News anchors repeating the words again and again. Analysts dissecting every implication. Twitter in meltdown. Hollywood in shock. Supporters devastated. Critics triumphant. And yet, while the world gasps, inside the palace the mood is eerily calm. Advisors knew this was coming. William had reportedly been pushing for months. And, ever the no-nonsense royal, is said to have voiced her agreement. Even Camilla, who endured decades of vilification, recognized that the monarchy must protect itself. And Charles, caught between fatherhood and duty, finally chose the crown. Do you think he hesitated? Do you think he looked at the paper and wondered what Diana would have said? Some whisper he did, that he paused, pen hovering, before forcing his hand down in a decisive stroke. Others say he didn't blink. His resolve was ironclad, the decision already made long before the ink dried. Which version do you believe? The historical weight of this decision cannot be overstated. The last time something so seismic happened was when Edward VIII abdicated in 1936 for Wallis Simpson, a twice-divorced American. The monarchy nearly collapsed. For decades, that scandal haunted the Windsors, shaping their attitudes toward outsiders and the sanctity of titles. And now, history repeats in eerie echoes. Another American woman, another royal man, another fracture that redefines the institution. But this time, the monarchy is determined not to let history control them. They've acted swiftly, decisively, and brutally. The Sussex experiment is over. So where does this leave Harry and Meghan? At this precise moment, as news breaks, they are scrambling. Imagine Meghan's phone lighting up with calls from PR advisors. Picture Harry, stunned, staring at the news ticker running across screens in California. The weight of centuries pressing down on their shoulders, but no royal shield left to protect them. Do you feel the irony? They once demanded independence, and now independence has been forced upon them in the harshest way possible. But here's where things get darker. This decree is not just about what was taken. It's about what comes next. Because the moment those titles vanish, the dominoes start to fall. Hollywood deals, friendships, political aspirations, even their children's status. Everything begins to unravel. The bombshell was dropped. The fallout is only beginning. And what Harry and Meghan lost in that single moment is far more devastating than they realize. Because when the crown takes something away, it never gives it back. But the true devastation, the real list of losses, is only just coming into focus. Line by line, privilege by privilege, identity by identity, everything they built is slipping away. And what comes next will leave even their staunchest supporters gasping. Because this isn't just the loss of titles. It's the loss of their entire future. But what exactly did they lose beyond the words Duke and Duchess? The list is long, brutal, and damning, and it's only just beginning to unravel. What does it mean to lose everything? Not just a crown, not just a title, but the scaffolding of identity, influence, and opportunity that once defined your place in the world. For Harry and Meghan, the stripping of their titles wasn't just about a symbolic duke or duchess being erased. No, it was the slow, agonizing dismantling of an empire they believed they had built, an empire that, without royal cement, crumbles brick by brick. Let's break it down line by line, because what was taken from them is staggering. First, the obvious, the dukedom itself. Duke and Duchess of Sussex. To the casual observer, this may seem like just a pair of words. But do you know what those words really mean? They are power. They are legacy. They are currency. Without them, the Sussexes are not figures of royalty. They are simply Harry Windsor and Meghan Markle. Commoners. Think about the fall. From palace balconies and military parades to Hollywood red carpets that no longer seem quite as glamorous when stripped of royal shine. Do you feel the sting of that? Now, look deeper. With the titles gone, so too vanishes their official standing in the royal hierarchy. In the past, even after Megxit, their names still carried weight within the order of precedence. Harry, son of the king, was still a duke, still recognized in ceremonial lists. Meghan, by extension, held recognition as his duchess. But now, their names are omitted. They are absent. They are ghosts in the family tree. How do you think that feels? To once stand near the heart of an ancient monarchy, only to find yourself erased by decree? And then comes the ceremonial privileges. Did you know that titles aren't just labels? They unlock rights? Invitations to official events, seating in state ceremonies, recognition in the Church of England. Without those titles, they are spectators, not participants. They cannot appear on the balcony. They cannot process with the royals. They cannot wear the cloak of tradition. Imagine Meghan watching from across the Atlantic as the king's birthday parade unfolds. Imagine Harry knowing that, even as his brother William marches with his children, he has no role, no uniform, no standing. It's exile cloaked in ceremony. But the losses don't end there. Think of patronages. These are honorary roles granted by the crown to connect royals with charities, institutions, and causes. Harry and Meghan once boasted a glittering list of them: military organizations, arts councils, humanitarian groups. Each patronage carried prestige. Each was a doorway to networks of power and influence. Gone. Revoked. Stripped as cleanly as the titles themselves. And here's the cruel irony. Many of those charities loved Harry and Meghan personally, but without the royal endorsement, the allure faded. Their fundraising value plummeted. Their invitations dried up. A titleless prince and duchess are not a draw in the same way. They are celebrities, yes, but celebrities among thousands in Hollywood. The uniqueness, the magnetism, the royal aura, all gone. Now let's talk about something sharper: security. Titles often come with privileges that extend beyond ceremony. Security protection is one of them. While Harry has long fought for taxpayer-funded security for his family, his demands now carry even less weight. A commoner, regardless of bloodline, cannot claim the same entitlements as a working royal. And with the titles revoked, the crown has little reason to accommodate his pleas. Imagine the sting of that, knowing your wife and children are more vulnerable now because the institution decided you were no longer worthy of its shield. And then there's the financial devastation. This one hurts the most. Because, make no mistake, the Sussex Empire was built on branding. Sussex Royal. The Netflix deal. The book deals. The speaking tours. The documentaries. All of it relied on one thing: the faint, lingering glow of royalty. When Harry's memoir, Spare, hit shelves, what gave it weight wasn't just his words. It was his status. When Meghan signed on for projects, what intrigued producers wasn't just her talent. It was her Duchess identity. Without that, what are they selling? A celebrity story. And celebrity stories are disposable. Have you noticed something? The world already began turning on them even before this decree. The Spotify deal collapsed. Hollywood insiders whispered about waning interest. Netflix grew tired of endless Sussex dramas. Without titles, those whispers grow louder. Do you think contracts will renew so easily now? Or will the Sussexes suddenly find the doors of Hollywood closing in their faces? But perhaps the most cutting loss is intangible: the prestige itself. Prestige is like oxygen. You don't notice it when you have it, but the moment it's gone, you suffocate. Harry and Meghan once dined with presidents, lunched with prime ministers, and took center stage at global conferences. Why? Because they weren't just Harry and Meghan. They were the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. That aura gave them gravitas. Without it, they are simply a couple with a complicated story. And in a world of short attention spans, that story has an expiration date. Now, think of the children. Archie and Lilibet. Their futures are now uncertain. Without the Sussex titles, their claims to courtesy titles or future recognition weaken. Their royal lineage, once a source of pride, now looks like a distant shadow. Meghan fought to have them acknowledged, fought for the dignity of her children being recognized as prince and princess. But if Harry and Meghan themselves are cut down, what future do Archie and Lilibet inherit? Do they grow up as American children with royal blood but no royal standing? Do they become outsiders to a family that still represents their heritage? Ask yourself, is this what Meghan feared most? Is this what Harry dreaded all along? That his children would grow up without the titles that once defined him? And yet, the stripping of titles was not just about what the couple lost. It was about what the crown reclaimed. The monarchy sent a message: you may use our bloodline, but you may not use our brand. That line is now etched into stone. No Sussex royal websites. No Duchess-branded merchandise. No royal labels attached to commercial deals. The legal teams are already moving, hunting down every attempt to profit off what no longer belongs to them. It's not just exile. It's erasure. Do you see the precision of this? The monarchy didn't merely punish Harry and Meghan. They dismantled the very scaffolding of their global persona. Line by line, privilege by privilege, loss by loss. And the cruelty doesn't stop there. Because without the cushion of royal recognition, without the automatic respect that comes with a title, every move Harry and Meghan make will be judged more harshly, more brutally. Their words will carry less weight. Their projects will draw less attention. Their scandals will sting more deeply. The loss is total. But here's the twist. Harry and Meghan thought they were untouchable. They thought the monarchy needed them more than they needed the monarchy. They believed that their popularity, their Hollywood shine, their global recognition made them immune to punishment. But the crown just proved them wrong. And now, they must face the consequences. Because this isn't just about losing titles. It's about losing everything those titles made possible. And without them, the cracks in their empire will spread faster than even they can control. But here's the burning question: how will Hollywood react? Will Netflix, Spotify, book publishers, and celebrity friends stand by them, or turn away now that the shine is gone? The answer to that question is darker than you think. Because their financial empire, the one thing they thought was untouchable, is already beginning to collapse. And the fallout in Hollywood is about to show just how fragile the Sussex dream really was. What happens when the lights of Hollywood start to dim? When the glittering contracts and multi-million-dollar deals that once seemed untouchable begin to wobble, all because the royal shine that fueled them has been switched off. That is the brutal reality now facing Harry and Meghan. The decree that stripped them of their titles didn't just slam shut the doors of Buckingham Palace. It rattled the gilded gates of Hollywood too. Because let's be honest, why did Netflix, Spotify, and major publishers rush to hand them massive deals in the first place? It wasn't because Harry was a skilled writer or Meghan was a proven entertainment powerhouse. It wasn't even because their love story fascinated the world. It was because they were the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Royalty sells. Royalty intrigues. Royalty legitimizes. And now, that royal stamp has been torn away. The first domino in this collapse is Netflix. Remember the fanfare? The streaming giant announced with great flourish that it had signed Harry and Meghan to a reported $100 million multi-year deal. The world was promised documentaries, scripted series, children's content, and even films. The headlines alone made waves. The Sussexes take Hollywood by storm. But what actually happened? One big hit. The Netflix docuseries Harry and Meghan, which aired to record-breaking numbers at first, then swiftly ignited backlash. Critics accused them of whining, recycling old grievances, and monetizing their pain. The novelty wore off quickly. Beyond that, a documentary about the Invictus Games, a project about Nelson Mandela's legacy. Some ideas pitched, others shelved. Netflix executives reportedly grew impatient. Where was the content? Where was the return on their massive investment? Now, layer the loss of titles onto this picture. Without Duke and Duchess, without the royal aura, what do Harry and Meghan bring to Netflix that another celebrity couple couldn't? Do their stories still carry the same weight without the prestige of monarchy attached? It's a chilling thought for two people whose brand depended on the crown they abandoned. Spotify tells an even darker story. Meghan launched her podcast, Archetypes, to much anticipation. Big-name guests, carefully curated topics, lavish promotion. But after one season, the deal collapsed. Spotify executives openly criticized the couple, suggesting they hadn't produced enough content to justify the millions they were paid. Behind closed doors, some insiders even called the Sussexes grifters. Imagine the humiliation, streaming bosses publicly dismissing them after they once courted them with open arms. If Spotify walked away when they were still the Duke and Duchess, what does that mean now that those titles are gone? The answer is obvious. Fewer platforms will be willing to gamble on their names. Fewer executives will tolerate underperformance when the royal mystique is no longer there to cover the cracks. And then there are the book deals. Harry's memoir, Spare, became an international sensation, not necessarily because of literary merit, but because it was the raw confession of a prince. People bought it to read the grievances of a man born into the firm. They wanted royal gossip straight from the horse's mouth. But tell me, would Harry Windsor, commoner, without his dukedom, have sold millions of copies? Or was it the title on the cover that turned it into a phenomenon? Publishers are asking the same question right now. If Harry or Meghan were to pitch a second memoir, would it carry the same punch? Or would readers dismiss it as another celebrity tell-all, stripped of the regal intrigue that once justified the hype? The industry is fickle, and the loss of titles strips away the very uniqueness that once made their stories irresistible. Let's not forget the speaking circuit. Harry and Meghan commanded astronomical fees for speeches at corporate events, universities, and summits. Reports suggested fees as high as $1 million per appearance. Why? Because they weren't just celebrities, they were royalty. A speech from a duke and duchess carried gravitas, a brush of history, a taste of monarchy. Without that, how many Fortune 500 companies will keep writing those checks? And here's where it gets even more brutal. Event organizers are already whispering that demand is cooling. Interest is waning. Invitations are fewer. The novelty has worn off, and the price tag no longer matches the perceived value. The Sussex brand, once golden, is tarnishing before our very eyes. But the collapse isn't just professional. It's personal. In Hollywood, relevance is currency. And without titles, without prestige, the Sussexes face the chilling reality of becoming ordinary celebrities in a city overflowing with them. Do you think Oprah will keep championing them with the same zeal? Will the A-list friends who once attended their star-studded weddings and baby showers continue to stand by them? Or will they quietly step back, no longer interested in being associated with a couple who have lost the one thing that made them truly unique? Already, we've seen signs. Jessica Mulroney, once Meghan's closest friend, has grown distant. Tyler Perry, who gave them refuge after they left the UK, has stayed noticeably quiet. Even Oprah herself, who once facilitated their explosive interview, has pivoted to other projects. The Hollywood spotlight is merciless, and loyalty is rare when the shine fades. Now let's think about the cruel irony. Harry and Meghan left the monarchy to carve out their independence. They said they wanted to be financially self-sufficient, to build their own empire free of the crown's control. And for a time, it worked. They signed deals worth hundreds of millions. They lived in a sprawling Montecito mansion. They hobnobbed with the world's elite. But here's the truth. Their empire was never independent. It was parasitic. It fed on the royal brand while pretending to reject it. It thrived on the mystique of titles they claimed to despise. And once the monarchy pulled the plug, the empire began to collapse. Do you see the contradiction? They said, "We don't need the monarchy." But every dollar they earned, every headline they generated, every spotlight they commanded proved the opposite. They needed those titles more than they ever admitted. And now, stripped bare, the harsh reality is exposed for the world to see. Hollywood is ruthless. Today's darlings are tomorrow's has-beens. Without titles, Harry and Meghan risk becoming yesterday's news. Another celebrity couple clinging to past scandals, unable to reinvent themselves in a culture that moves on faster than the blink of an eye. And the danger isn't just fading relevance, it's outright mockery. Already, critics have sharpened their knives. Late-night hosts joke about their royal woes. Tabloids gloat over their downfall. Social media explodes with memes mocking their desperation. Without royal dignity to protect them, they are exposed, vulnerable, and ridiculed. So what does the future hold? Can they reinvent themselves as American power players, perhaps in politics or activism? Can Meghan pivot into a Michelle Obama-style figure, championing causes and speaking for women? Can Harry salvage his image through veteran advocacy? Maybe. But without the crown, every step is harder. Every project faces more skepticism. Every deal comes with more risk. The Hollywood empire they thought would last forever is crumbling faster than anyone imagined. And the collapse has only just begun. Because the real heartbreak isn't what they lost in the boardrooms of Netflix or Spotify. It's what they stand to lose in their own home. Because the children, Archie and Lilibet, are now caught in the fallout. And their futures may be the most devastating casualty of all. What does it mean when royal children are raised without royal recognition? What does it mean for their safety, their schooling, their sense of identity? The answer is darker than Harry and Meghan ever expected. And the Archie and Lilibet dilemma will change everything. What happens to a child when their birthright is erased before they even have a chance to understand it? Imagine growing up knowing your grandfather is the King of England. Your uncle is the future monarch. Your cousins are heirs to the throne. And yet you stand on the outside, titleless, sidelined, treated as if you don't belong. That is the reality Archie and Lilibet now face. The stripping of Harry and Meghan's titles wasn't just a blow to the couple. It was a seismic shock that rippled down into the lives of their children. And here's where the story takes an even darker turn. The collateral damage of this royal decree isn't just financial or reputational. It's generational. Let's start with the simple question. What does this mean for Archie and Lilibet's titles? By tradition, as the grandchildren of the reigning monarch, they were entitled to be called Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet. Meghan fought bitterly for that recognition. In interviews, she expressed fear that her children were being treated differently, that their heritage was being diminished. It became one of the central themes of her grievances against the crown. And yet, with Harry and Meghan stripped of their own dukedom, the ground beneath Archie and Lilibet shifts dramatically. Because what credibility do courtesy titles hold when their parents no longer have any? Can Archie truly grow up as Prince Archie if his father is no longer Duke of Sussex? Do you see the contradiction? Then comes the issue of security. Royal children with official recognition are typically afforded certain protections. Their place in the line of succession, their status as working royals or potential working royals, entitles them to a degree of safeguarding. But now, Archie and Lilibet are more vulnerable than ever. They are the American-born children of a commoner couple with royal blood, but no royal privilege. And Harry knows this all too well. He lost his mother, Princess Diana, in a tragedy tied to the intersection of fame, danger, and inadequate protection. Do you think he sleeps well at night knowing his own children may face similar risks, without the shield of official royal backing? Let's step into Meghan's perspective for a moment. As a mother, imagine the fury, the heartbreak. She once dreamed of giving her children a life of both privilege and purpose, a chance to be recognized as part of a global legacy while also enjoying freedom in America. Now, she watches as that legacy is pulled away. Meghan has always seen herself as a fighter, a protector. But this is a battle she cannot win. The irony is sharp. She left the UK partly to shield her children from scrutiny, from racism, from the cold rigidity of palace life. And yet by leaving, and by provoking the institution again and again, she may have guaranteed that her children are now permanently cut off from the very protections she once demanded for them. But the implications stretch beyond security and titles. Think of identity. Children crave a sense of belonging, of knowing who they are and where they come from. Archie and Lilibet are caught in a strange limbo. Too royal to be ordinary. Too ordinary to be royal. How will they reconcile that? Picture Archie at school in California. Other children ask, "Is it true your grandfather is the King of England?" How does he answer? With pride? With confusion? With resentment? And what about Lilibet, named after the Queen herself, yet growing up in America without ever knowing the true weight of that legacy? Do you see how cruel this is? The monarchy that once celebrated their births now treats them as footnotes. And let's not ignore the inheritance question. Royal titles often carry with them not just prestige, but pathways to future wealth, influence, and opportunity. Stripped of those ties, Archie and Lilibet's futures look less like golden roads and more like uncertain trails. Will they grow up as American celebrities, forever defined by their parents' feuds? Or will they find themselves shut out of the very heritage that once made their names resonate worldwide? Some insiders whisper that William, as future king, may ensure that his children, George, Charlotte, Louis, remain the central figures, while Archie and Lilibet fade into obscurity. If that happens, the Windsor family tree becomes a tale of two halves, one thriving in the heart of the crown, the other banished to the margins. But here's the deepest cut of all: Harry himself. Harry knows what it feels like to live in his brother's shadow, to be the spare, to be the one who never quite belonged. He wrote about it. He agonized over it. He rebelled against it. And now, his children risk inheriting that very same burden, only worse. Because unlike Harry, who at least remained a prince, Archie and Lilibet may grow up as outsiders with no official standing. Can you imagine the guilt Harry must feel? To realize that his war with the crown has cost not just him, but his children, the recognition they once deserved? Now let's return to the palace for a moment. From their perspective, this was inevitable. The monarchy exists to protect itself. If allowing Harry and Meghan to keep their titles opened the door for Archie and Lilibet to make future claims, then the line had to be drawn now. Cut them off before it gets messy. Seal the wound before it festers. Cold, yes, but effective. And yet, the optics are brutal. A grandfather cutting off not just his son, but his grandchildren. A monarchy that once promised to modernize now accused of punishing innocent children for the sins of their parents. Do you think the public will forgive this? Or will history paint Charles as the man who abandoned his own bloodline for the sake of the crown? Meanwhile, in California, Harry and Meghan are left scrambling. How do you explain to a child that they were once a prince and princess, but no longer? How do you tell Archie that while his cousins will one day stand on palace balconies, he will watch from the sidelines? How do you reassure Lilibet that her name, a tribute to her great-grandmother, still carries meaning when the institution attached to it has disowned her? The answers aren't simple, and they haunt the Sussexes every day. But the cruelest irony of all is this. Meghan once claimed she wanted to protect her children from the harshness of royal life. And now, by losing everything, she has exposed them to something even harsher: irrelevance. In a world that once celebrated them as the future of a modern monarchy, Archie and Lilibet are now left adrift, royal by blood but nameless by decree. Do you see the tragedy? Do you feel the weight of it? And here's where the story takes its sharpest turn yet. Because this wasn't a sudden decision. No, this was planned, orchestrated, calculated. The palace didn't stumble into stripping titles. It built toward it for years. Meetings, strategies, whispered conversations behind closed doors. Which brings us to the next revelation. This wasn't just Charles acting alone. This was the result of a royal war council. William, Anne, Camilla, advisors, all of them playing a part in the most decisive move of the modern monarchy. And what happened in those secret palace meetings will shock you. Because the plot to cut off Harry and Meghan was brewing long before they ever realized it. What happens when the family you once trusted becomes the architects of your downfall? When the people you shared dinners with, smiled beside at weddings, stood next to on balconies, gather quietly in secret to dismantle your life piece by piece. That is the chilling reality of what happened behind the palace walls. Because make no mistake, The decision to strip Harry and Meghan of their titles didn't happen in a moment of anger. It wasn't King Charles waking up one morning and impulsively declaring, "Enough." No, it was a calculated, deliberate, painstakingly orchestrated operation. Planned in whispers, signed in silence, executed with precision. Welcome to the palace war room. Imagine the setting. A chamber deep within Buckingham Palace, far from the public tours, far from the gilded halls that dazzle visitors. The air heavy with history, portraits of monarchs staring down at the living heirs below. At the center, a polished oak table scarred by decades of state decisions. Around it, the figures who would decide Harry and Meghan's fate. King Charles, stoic, eyes tired but resolute. His reign has been plagued by whispers of weakness, but here, in this room, he is the sovereign, the ultimate decider. To his right, Queen Camilla, silent but powerful. The woman who knows what it means to endure scandal, who has weathered decades of scorn to stand now as queen consort. She does not speak often in these meetings, but when she does, her words carry the weight of survival. Across the table, Prince William, the heir, the future, the man who has watched his brother dismantle the dignity of the family with every interview, every memoir, every accusation. His jaw clenched, his words sharp. He is no longer the forgiving brother. He is the protector of the crown that will one day sit upon his head. Beside him, Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, blunt, unflinching. She has always been the no-nonsense voice in the room, the one who cuts through emotion with brutal practicality. She does not entertain sentiment. She deals in reality. Advisors line the walls, lawyers with briefing papers, press officers with public opinion polls, strategists with scenarios mapped out. The tension is palpable. The debate begins. Some argue for patience. Stripping them now may look cruel, one advisor warns. It will feed their narrative of victimhood. The world will say the monarchy punished them for telling the truth. But William cuts in, his voice cold. How much longer must we tolerate betrayal? He's attacked us in his book. He's humiliated us in his interviews. He has accused this family of cruelty, of racism, of neglect. How long before the institution itself begins to crumble under the weight of his words? And nods. Titles are not playthings. They are sacred. If they are not working royals, if they do not serve the crown, then why should they be allowed to trade on its name? Enough is enough. Camilla speaks softly, but her words land like daggers. If they continue unchecked, the monarchy will be remembered not for its service, but for its scandals. We must draw a line. And Charles listens. He absorbs every word. He weighs the loyalty of a father against the duty of a king. The silence stretches until finally he speaks. The monarchy cannot survive half in, half out. It cannot survive divided. If we must preserve it for William, for George, then we must act. Not tomorrow. Not next year. Now. The decision is made. But how did they get here? This war council was not a single meeting. It was the culmination of years of quiet strategy. Since Harry and Meghan's departure in 2020, palace officials have kept detailed records. The Oprah interview, the Netflix docuseries, the memoir. Every insult cataloged. Every breach noted. One advisor reveals polling data. Public opinion is clear. 8 in 10 Britons believe the Sussexes should lose their titles. The people no longer see them as working royals. They see them as profiteers. Another lays out the legal groundwork. The monarch has the power to revoke titles. Precedent exists. We can draft the decree in a way that leaves no room for challenge. Even financial advisors weigh in. So long as they trade under royal titles, they undermine the credibility of the monarchy. Every Netflix contract, every speech they give, chips away at the crown's integrity. It becomes clear, this isn't revenge. It's preservation. A surgical strike designed to protect the monarchy from further erosion. And yet, inside this war room, personal emotions cannot be ignored. William's anger simmers beneath the surface. Sources say he spoke with a rare bluntness that startled even senior aides. He has betrayed us, William said of Harry. He has betrayed me. If we allow him to keep these titles, we send the message that betrayal carries no consequence. What does that say to the nation? What does that say to my children? And reportedly supported him. When Edward abdicated, the monarchy nearly collapsed. We learned then that sentiment cannot come before duty. Harry made his choice. Meghan made hers. It is not cruelty to accept that choice. it is reality. Charles, torn between fatherhood and kingship, sat quietly for long stretches. But when he finally nodded, the weight of history shifted. And Camilla? Many underestimate her role, but those close to the palace whisper that her counsel was decisive. Having lived through decades of scandal, she knows better than anyone that the monarchy survives not by bending, but by standing firm. "We have endured worse," she reportedly said, "but only by acting, not by waiting." Her words lingered in the room. When the final decision was reached, the mood was solemn. Advisors scribbled notes. Lawyers prepared drafts. A timeline was established. The decree would be announced with precision, neither too celebratory nor too apologetic. Firm, final, regal. And as the meeting ended, one thing was clear. This was no longer about Harry and Meghan as individuals. This was about the survival of the monarchy itself. But here's the chilling part. While Harry and Meghan enjoyed life in Montecito, sunlit gardens, celebrity dinners, interviews, and cameras, their fate was being sealed thousands of miles away in a room they would never enter again. Every privilege they thought untouchable, every advantage they believed permanent, was being dismantled behind closed doors. And they had no idea. Think about it. The very family they once accused of coldness and cruelty was, in that moment, colder than ever. Calculating, strategic, ruthless. The crown was sharpening its blade, and Harry and Meghan didn't even hear it being unsheathed. By the time the decree was signed, their future was no longer theirs to control. And here's where the betrayal cuts deepest. The final blow didn't just come from Charles. It came from a place Harry never expected. Because while the king's hand signed the decree, the pressure, the push, the unrelenting demand for finality came from someone closer. Someone Harry once called his best friend, his ally, his brother, William. The William factor. The man who once walked behind him at Diana's funeral now stood behind the decision that ended his royal identity. And that twist will shatter everything you thought you knew about the brothers' feud. What does it feel like when the brother who once held your hand in grief becomes the very man who presses the blade against your legacy? For Harry, that is the unbearable truth. Because behind the king's decree, behind the advisors and the strategists, stood one figure whose influence tipped the scales more than any other, William. This is the William factor. The heir versus the spare. The future versus the past. Brother against brother. Think back to the images etched into history. Two young boys, William and Harry, walking behind their mother's coffin in 1997. A nation wept as they trudged side by side, their faces pale, their shoulders burdened with grief no child should carry. In that moment, they were united, bound by tragedy, forever linked by the absence of Diana. But fast forward to today, and those same brothers are worlds apart. William, the dutiful heir, preparing for kingship with discipline and restraint. Harry, the rebel, tearing at the threads of the very institution that shaped them both. And now, William has done the unthinkable. He has pushed to strip his own brother of everything. Why? What could drive a man to turn so ruthlessly against the sibling he once called his closest ally? The answer lies in a simmering fury that has built for years. It began subtly. William's frustration when Harry first introduced Meghan. His skepticism about the whirlwind romance. His warnings that Harry was moving too fast. Words that Harry interpreted as cold, judgmental, even jealous. From that moment, a fracture formed. But fractures can be healed. Brothers fight. Brothers reconcile. What made this one permanent was what came after. The Oprah interview. William, blindsided, forced to answer a journalist's question about accusations of racism within the royal family. His terse reply, "We are very much not a racist family," revealed not just denial, but deep humiliation. Harry and Meghan hadn't just attacked the institution. They had attacked William's reputation. Then came Spare, Harry's memoir, a book dripping with resentment, anecdotes designed to wound. Stories of William's temper, of physical altercations, of jealousy and distance. Harry didn't just air family grievances. He broadcast them to the world. Imagine reading your brother's words, printed in ink, calling you aggressive, cold, unfeeling. Would you forgive that? William didn't. Behind closed doors, insiders say William's anger reached boiling point. He was no longer willing to tolerate Harry's slights. no longer willing to watch the monarchy drag through the mud by his own flesh and blood. But here's the twist. This wasn't just personal. It was existential. William wasn't just angry as a brother. He was alarmed as the heir. Because every attack Harry made didn't just hurt William's feelings. It chipped away at the institution William will one day inherit. Every accusation of cruelty, every claim of neglect, every whisper of dysfunction, it all cast doubt on the very crown that will sit on William's head. And so William drew a line. At the War Council, William's words carried thunder. Advisors described his tone as icy, deliberate, unwavering. He argued that Harry had crossed every boundary, broken every bond, and now threatened the monarchy itself. If we do not act, he reportedly said, we signal to the world that this institution tolerates betrayal, that it rewards disloyalty. My children will one day inherit this crown. What example do we set if we allow Harry to keep profiting from titles he uses against us? These were not the words of a brother pleading for reconciliation. These were the words of a future king asserting dominance. And Charles listened. For all his authority, for all his years of waiting, Charles knows his reign is transitional. It is William who must secure the future. And so when William pressed for finality, Charles bowed to the inevitable. But think of Harry for a moment. How must it feel to know that your own brother, your best man at your wedding, your partner in childhood adventures, was the driving force behind your downfall? The pain must cut deeper than any headline, deeper than any financial loss. This isn't just exile, it's betrayal. And yet, William likely feels betrayed too. From his perspective, Harry struck first. Harry broke the brotherhood by airing their private lives for profit. Harry crossed the line when he painted William as the villain in his global narrative. In William's mind, the only way forward was to sever ties completely. Do you see the tragedy? Each brother believes the other betrayed him. Each brother feels justified. Each brother sees himself as the victim. And between them lies a chasm that no bridge can span. But there's another layer, one few dare to discuss. William's influence over Charles has grown enormously since the Queen's passing. Advisors whisper that William is no longer just heir apparent. He is the silent co-ruler. His voice carries weight in decisions both public and private. And in this case, his push for Harry's erasure was more than persuasive. It was decisive. In other words, William didn't just support the stripping of titles. He orchestrated it. And what about Meghan? How does she view William's role? For Meghan, William has always been the immovable obstacle. The man who never embraced her, who questioned her motives, who treated her as an outsider. She once hoped to charm him, to prove herself. Instead, she encountered skepticism at every turn. To now watch him play the central role in her family's downfall must feel like vindication of her darkest fears. William, in her eyes, was always the enemy. Now he has confirmed it. And Harry? Torn, conflicted, angry. Imagine him trying to reconcile memories of childhood with the coldness of the present. The brother who once whispered jokes in the back of limousines, who once shielded him from bullies at school, now standing at the helm of the decision that erased him from royal life. It is Shakespearean in its cruelty. And yet, for William, the decision may bring peace. He has protected the crown. He has drawn a boundary. He has ensured that the monarchy will not bend to Harry's rebellion. For him, this is duty. Not malice. Not revenge. Duty. But here's the cruelest twist. William's victory is Harry's annihilation. And in this battle, there are no winners. Only wounds that will never heal. And just when you think the war between the brothers has reached its peak, the story twists again. Because while Harry reels from William's betrayal, Meghan is preparing her countermove. A countermove not born of monarchy, but of Hollywood. A plan to turn exile into opportunity. Yes, the palace may have stripped their titles. But Meghan, ever the strategist, has no intention of fading quietly. And her counterattack will shock even those who thought they had seen it all. What do you do when the palace slams its doors in your face? When the titles that gave you status are erased with one signature, when the royal aura that opened every door in Hollywood suddenly evaporates. Most people would crumble. Most would retreat in humiliation. But Meghan Markle is not most people. When Meghan feels cornered, she does what she's always done. She plots her countermove. And this time, she isn't aiming small. She is preparing for nothing less than a Hollywood counterattack. Picture Meghan in Montecito. The news of the decree still fresh, headlines swirling, pundits dissecting every implication. She sits at the long marble table in her mansion's kitchen, phone in hand, calls pouring in from agents, PR consultants, strategists. The fury simmers beneath her polished exterior, but make no mistake, this isn't despair. This is calculation. Because Meghan knows something the palace underestimates. In Hollywood, reinvention is survival. And if she can't be the Duchess of Sussex anymore, she will be something else. Something bigger. Something untouchable. Her first move? Politics. This isn't a new idea. Rumors have circulated for years that Meghan harbors political ambitions. She's dabbled already, writing to senators about parental leave, aligning herself with American causes. With her royal identity stripped, those whispers grow louder. Could Meghan pivot from Duchess to Congresswoman? Could she rebrand herself as a modern-day power player, a progressive voice with global recognition? Insiders whisper that conversations have already taken place. Strategists suggesting a run for office in California. Donors intrigued by her platform. Meghan positioning herself as an outsider who understands both privilege and prejudice, both royalty and ordinary struggle. It's bold. It's risky. But in Meghan's mind, it's the perfect countermove to being silenced by the crown. Her second move? Storytelling. Hollywood still runs on content, and Meghan knows the most powerful currency she has is her story. The titles may be gone, but the drama remains. And if there's one thing Hollywood loves, it's drama. Think about it. Meghan has already weaponized her voice before. The Oprah interview drew tens of millions of viewers worldwide. Her Netflix series kept audiences talking for months. Her podcast brought in A-list guests. Why stop now? Rumors swirl of a second memoir, this time Meghan's own. A book where she tells her side of the story in full. No more careful diplomacy. No more hiding behind Harry's words. Her version of palace life. Her truth. Her pain. Her fury. Can you imagine the headlines? The sales? The frenzy? And if not a book, perhaps a second Netflix docuseries. Meghan Unfiltered. Meghan versus the monarchy. A story too lucrative for Hollywood to ignore. But Meghan's counterattack isn't just about projects. It's about image. The palace wants to paint her as defeated, as irrelevant, as erased. Meghan refuses to play that role. Instead, she will double down on glamour. Expect appearances at galas, red carpets, high-profile interviews. Expect fashion moments designed to dominate headlines. Expect a carefully curated image of resilience. Because if there's one thing Meghan understands, it's optics. She knows how to stand in front of cameras and look like the victor, even when the walls are closing in behind her. And what about Harry? Here lies the complication. Harry is broken, humiliated, shaken by the betrayal of his own father and brother. Meghan, however, cannot afford to wallow. She needs Harry to stand tall beside her, to play the part of the supportive husband, the partner in reinvention. But insiders whisper that tensions are growing. Meghan's ambition burns bright, while Harry longs for something quieter, more private. The clash between them could ignite at any moment. Do you see the contradiction? The very man whose memoir set their empire aflame now looks exhausted by the spotlight, while the woman who once claimed she wanted privacy is preparing to dive deeper into it. But Meghan has another weapon up her sleeve: victimhood. Every strategist in Hollywood knows the power of the victim narrative. Meghan will lean into the idea that she and Harry were cast aside, punished for speaking truth, silenced by an archaic institution. She will frame herself not as a failed duchess, but as a brave whistleblower, a woman who stood up against the world's most powerful monarchy and paid the price. And in a culture obsessed with underdogs and comeback stories, that framing could work. Hollywood loves redemption arcs. Meghan's counterattack may not just save her brand, it could transform her into an icon of defiance. Still, the risks are enormous. For every admirer who praises her resilience, there will be critics who mock her desperation. For every door that opens, another may slam shut. The more she pushes herself as a Hollywood power player, the more she risks alienating the audiences already fatigued by Sussex drama. And then there's the looming shadow of failure. If Meghan's political ambitions collapse, if her Hollywood projects flop, if her image fractures beyond repair, she doesn't just risk her own reputation. She risks dragging Harry down with her. So here we are. The palace has stripped her of titles, but Meghan refuses to vanish. She is rallying her allies, calling her agents, polishing her image, and sharpening her weapons. The Hollywood counterattack is coming. And whether it succeeds or implodes, one thing is certain: Meghan will not go quietly.